I'm ZSH Plays, welcome to Planet Zoo Console Edition. Today we're going to be building our first ever habitat. We're going to only be using pieces from the Standard Edition, and I'm going to show you everything you need to know: animals, paths, habitats, and how to use water in the game. So we're in sandbox mode for this build on the Oceania tropical map. You'll know if you watch my channel that franchise mode is my favourite, but for this video we're going to be in sandbox mode so we can access all the Standard Edition pieces straight away. And we've got some concrete pillars here that we've recoloured a nice shade of pink, and we're going to build an archway for the flamingo shelter, which is going to be the big sort of centerpiece to this habitat. Now, building in Planet Zoo can be pretty complex. We're going to keep things pretty simple for this build. As you watch this, I've had about 3 days to learn the new controls and UI in Planet Zoo Console Edition. Big thank you to Frontier for giving me early access to this. So what I wanted to do is build a beautiful but simple habitat that new Console Edition players can watch and follow along with, so that you can build this in your own zoo. I've put the habitat on the Frontier workshop, so if you want to just put it in your zoo without building it, or pick it to pieces and work out how everything's done, then you can grab it from there right now. And if you're overwhelmed by the controls and the complexity of this game, don't worry, you can actually see me getting better at it throughout this video as I work out the various different options that you can choose to make placing objects easier and things like that. But we're going to build the rest of this building using the grid, which enables you to really quickly place down pieces like this wall piece, so we can just get this into the shape of the building that we want. We'll do the first level, and then we'll move up and put a second level in as well. The limestone pieces that we're using here and the concrete pieces go really nicely together. They're a good combo. We're going to select the whole building except for the arch, and then move it down so that the arch extends above the building. This is based on a photo of a building that's been sat around in my inspiration folder for absolutely ages. Never had the chance to use it, but I thought it'd be perfect for this video. We're going to put an arch piece in above the gap in the door to make this look nice. We'll match the colour up with what we've got already, and then slide it into the perfect position so it's seamless. There we go, that looks really nice. And now we're going to start decorating the walls. The building has more arches going all the way down both sides of the main arch, which are much smaller and made out of these sort of tiles. So we're going to use this roof piece, get it to the right colour, and then bury this in the wall so we've only got the front half of it coming out, so it's like a canopy. And then we'll duplicate these and start building 3 archways on this side of the building, which later on we can just copy across to the other side of the building to save time. We'll move these into the centre, make sure they're in the right place, drop them down a little bit, and then that's pretty much where we want them. And then we're going to use a different type of concrete pillar to create arches underneath these canopies. So this one's thinner than the ones we used for the main archway. It's got a nice texture on it as well. So we'll put a couple of those in, and then we'll use multi-select to grab them and put them on the other side of the canopy. And then we'll do the same thing again for the other 2 canopies and just drop the concrete pillars down a little bit so they fit in nicely there. You have to forgive how long it takes me to do this. I do not spend a lot of time playing PlayStation, I've got to admit, so I'm not the best with the controls, although I've only had a couple of days to learn them, to be fair. I think Frontier have done a really good job of converting the UI from keyboard and mouse to gamepad. Once you get used to it, it is really powerful. Almost done now. We just got one more of these to drop in right here, and again move this down to the right place. And then we're going to add one final detail to this section of the wall, which is some trim to go underneath the canopies. So we'll take this limestone trim and just copy this across underneath here. This ties the pillars into the canopy really nicely. Love this colour scheme as well. Not sure I've ever built anything pink. I've built very little green, but it's a really nice combo and it looks great at the back of the flamingo habitat. So we'll copy this across to the other side, and that is the facade of the building pretty much done. Time for some plants. So if you hit the circle button, you can filter down the results. So we're just going to put palm in there. We get access to all the lovely palm trees in Planet Zoo. We're going to pick the largest of the date palms, put one on either side of the habitat. Whenever you're placing plants, always change random rotation to on. And that means every time you place down a plant, the game will spin it in a random way and they won't all look the same. And then we're going to get some of the smaller date palms and place some of these in as well. Just a couple of these just in front of the larger palm, again on both sides. And we just do this freehand so it looks more natural rather than using the advanced move to make sure everything's absolutely perfect. So one more here, and then one final one here. And then we'll choose a different plant, the smallest of the coconut palms, and put one of these on either side of the central archway. I think that'll look really nice, especially with the differing heights and leaves that you get on these. And then we're going to make a little sort of plant bed in front of the smaller arches. So we're going to put some of these mulch pieces down in a line here so that the smaller plants have something to grow out of. Just get 3 of them all in a row, and then we're going to use some topiary and just sink one of these hedge pieces down into the middle of this mulch patch. You need to turn off the align to surface option if you want to sink things down into the ground, so we'll do that. And then we're going to do something that we do all the time in Planet Zoo once you get a bit more used to it, which is to use pieces for different uses than they're intended. So this is a grapevine. We all know what grapevines look like. We've all seen a vineyard, or at least pictures of vineyards, so they grow straight up out of the ground. But if you lay them down and sink them in a little bit, you get this really nice vibrant looking foliage that we can just use to fill this bed in. Looks really nice against the darker green of the hedge in the middle. So we'll put these all along here, and then this central one, maybe we'll sink this down a little bit more and put it on either side of that hedge so it doesn't obscure it too much, and we just get a really nice natural looking bed of foliage which we can then copy to the other side of the habitat. Time for a roof. We're back on the grid here, just placing in a load of limestone pieces. Nice and simple, nothing too complicated up here. And then we'll move down to the next level and place a floor in, just using some concrete pieces. And then we'll use the terrain paint to get rid of all the long grass that's growing through it here, so it looks nice and seamless. The way the terrain paint works in Planet Zoo is the animals actually know what terrain they're stood on. So if you put grass down and they're a herbivore, they might munch on it. If you put stone down, they're less likely to sleep on it. If you put snow down, some of the animals will dive into it, like the Arctic foxes. So it's important to get the right terrain, even if you've covered it up with another material. Back on the outside, we're going to place down this stone brick flooring to create a path to get the flamingos from their shelter to the big pool that we're going to build out the front for them. And this will also frame the area nicely and create some gardens where the plants that we've already placed down are. If this is literally your first time playing Planet Zoo, by the way, I would highly recommend starting with the career mode. That's effectively a tutorial that will show you all the other things that you need to know as well. And also, each time you complete one of the campaigns, you get a statue of one of the animals in that zoo that you can then use as part of your buildings in your own zoos. And speaking of things that you need to know, let's move on to some terrain work so we can get some water into the habitat and start building the pool for the flamingos. We're going to use the terrain stamp tool for this, which allows you to make large changes to the terrain in your zoo. So we'll get it into the right position, and then we'll switch it from add terrain to subtract terrain so we can dig a hole. Don't need one this deep, so we will make it a lot shallower. With flamingos, they're not really big on swimming, they're more of a wading bird. So with their pool, you want it to either be so shallow that they can just walk through it, or have a mixture of areas for swimming and areas for wading, but you don't want a deep one that would require them to swim all the time. It's not really what they're about. So once this is in the right place, then we will dig our first little hole here. There we go. This is how water works in Planet Zoo. There are two ways to have water in a habitat. You either need to hold it with terrain, like we're doing here, so you make a hole and put the water into it, or you hold it with barriers. You can't hold it in just with normal building pieces. It needs to be a solid barrier. So we're going to use the terrain method here. Dig it out. It doesn't need to be too tidy because we're going to be using building pieces to make the side of the pool and get everything looking nice. So let's put the water in. Looking nice. However, underwater, if we go down there, you can see that it's just plain mud, which is not attractive. So we're going to get this painted brick piece and put a really beautiful white bottom into the pool, and that'll really tie everything together. I've sunk it to below the waterline and just above the terrain, so we've still got a nice depth for the flamingos. We'll place it across here on the grid, and then what we're going to do is use multi-select to grab all of the pieces that we've just put down, and then we can copy those along the rest of the bottom of the pool to save time. Later on, we're going to explore the water options and get this kind of dark blue water looking more pool-like. But for now, what we need to do is sort out the edges of the pool where it joins onto the stone. So we're going to take this classic limestone fence and colour it white, and then put it so it joins from the very bottom of the stone pieces here. There we go, onto the edge of the pool. And then we can copy this along the side and get a really nice pool edge on here. It's almost got a swimming pool kind of vibe to it, which I like. It's like a house for flamingos, this, a very, very expensive house. You can still see some little bits of terrain that are sticking out too far. That's fine, I'll get rid of those off camera in a little bit. If this method of copying things looks pretty slow and laborious, it is, because I didn't realize there was a move snap option. So you can see it on screen now. If we turn that on, then what we can do is move all these pieces automatically next to each other and get this done really quickly, which makes a big difference to the speed that you can build at. We'll turn it off again just so we can place this last piece in exactly the right place, and then we'll take a look at those water options I mentioned. So we're going to change the preset for the water to azure, which gives it a different color, and then we're going to add some subtle bubbles. And if we come in close now, you can see it looks absolutely amazing the way it reflects the sky there. Next up, we're going to put some islands in for the flamingos. So this is the forage pool. It's an enrichment item, which means it's an item that the animals can use. And this is where they get their food from. So we're going to put this exactly in the center of the pool using the advanced move option. There we go. And then we'll duplicate it and have 3 of these. So what we're going to do is just sink it down so it's touching the bottom of the pool, but the top of it still sticks up above it so that the food would stay in that part of the water. And then we'll copy one either side. So we've got lots of food for the flamingos and a nice look as well. It's flexi color, so we've changed it to pink to match up with everything else. And then we can move on to the paths. So the way paths work in Planet Zoo is these are the only things that guests will walk on. They will walk on paths and that is it. They will never leave the path. So if you want guests, you need paths. We've got a really nice texture on this one. So we'll place it down here with a great view of the flamingos. And then we're going to put a fence all the way along the front of the pool to keep the guests out and the flamingos in. And later on we'll do some modifications to this to make it a bit more substantial. And then speaking of keeping the flamingos in, we should probably have some sort of wall around the habitat as well. So we're going to put a wall in around here. You can keep animals in with building pieces or barriers. You do not have to use barriers to keep animals in. We'll explore that more in a minute when we put the barriers in. Let's get some more enrichment items in for the flamingos. We've got some sprinklers. Again, we've coloured these pink and we'll put a couple of these in a nice position in between the forage pools. And this is a good time to check out the heat maps feature in Planet Zoo, which is one of the most useful things for managing your zoo. It gives you various different management mode overviews of the zoo so you can see what's going on. So as we select to move this sprinkler, it's going to automatically change to the temperature view because sprinklers are firing out cold water, so obviously they change the temperature of any animals that are near them. So you can see the red, because it's a nice hot day on this map, and then the areas of blue where the sprinkler is going to affect the temperature. And there's all sorts of these heat map views that you can use to see how your guests are feeling, how your animals are feeling, etc. Let's move on to the barriers now. We're going to use 3 different barriers to build this habitat, including one really important one that gives you a lot of creative freedom. We're going to start with the hedge, which we're going to place down the sides of the pool and get this back towards the wall, and then we will use this temporarily to surround the entire habitat. We're going to switch some of it out in a bit for different types. The easiest way to do this is just to use one barrier type all the way around, get the shape how you want, and then you can change it to the exact barriers that you want if you're using more than one. So we'll get this down here, and then when we get to the front, we're going to switch to using the null barrier. So this is the first option on the list. It looks like a blue wall. This is basically an invisible barrier. It tells the game where the habitat is. In sandbox mode, you can choose whether it actually keeps the animals in or not. In franchise mode and challenge mode, it will not keep the animals in, and its primary usage is so that you can use building pieces to make a barrier which the animals can't get through, and then you use the null barrier to tell the game that that is where the habitat ends, and then the game knows where the animals should be, and you're not restricted to just using the default barriers to build habitats with. Every habitat needs a habitat gate so that the keepers can get in and out, so we'll place one in there, but it looks kind of weird in the middle of a hedge, so we'll switch this back part out for these log walls, and then we'll drop some plants into the hedge barrier just to make it look a little bit more realistic. It's kind of square looking. These are going to help sit it in really nicely, and once we've got this side done, we'll just copy the same pieces over to the other side so the other hedge looks good as well. We are almost done with the build now. We're going to drop some mesh pieces into the fence that we put at the front just to stop any baby flamingos getting out, and then we're going to place some of the buffalo grass pieces onto the lawns that we created earlier just to bring them to life a bit and make them more three-dimensional instead of just the flat plane of terrain that's there normally. Again with random rotation turned on. And then we're going to take some more of the smallest date palms and sink them down into the ground so they look more like ferns, and put some dirt over them so we get little flower beds around the path where the guests are going to walk. I love this dirt texture, it looks so good. We've got one more thing to do so that the habitat works, which is to make sure the keepers can get onto the islands to feed the flamingos. Keepers cannot walk through water, so we just need to make a little pathway for the keepers using the same piece that we used for the edge of the pool. One of the heat maps that I mentioned earlier will tell you exactly where staff can and can't get to in your habitat. So if you ever have an issue where the keepers can't get to a feeder, you can use the staff traversable area heat map to work out where they can't get to and fix it. And that is the build done. Let's go in and buy some flamingos. You'll need staff buildings to enable you to do this. The campaign mode will teach you all about that. But let's check out the finished habitat. Here's the flamingos, and here's the habitat. Simple but really effective, I think. The flamingos look absolutely gorgeous strutting about in here. Let's check out the feeders that we put in. I love the way they stand in a circle as they eat their shrimp or whatever it is they're eating. All of these shots are filmed with the game's cinematic camera, which is absolutely brilliant for creating stuff like this, so you can tour your own zoos. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Let's take a look at the whole build. From the forage pool, out into the guest area, and then with the building at the back. If you want to see what you can do with a little bit more time in game, then I have another flamingo habitat for you in my San Bernardino Zoo. You can see it here. I'll put a link to it on screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy Planet Zoo Console Edition, and I'll see you again very soon for some more Planet Zoo. Bye.